Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the latest in our series of Ask the Expert Live. This is a series which allows you to speak to real experts from international organizations who are all connected to the development of the United Nations Toolkit on synthetic drugs. Today, we're going to focus on a very important topic, and that is on access to medicines for medical and scientific purposes whilst preventing their diversion. We hope that by the time we finish, we would have answered a lot of your questions on how to promote access to and availability of substances under international control, whilst importantly, preventing their diversion. Now, most of us at one stage in our lives will require some medication to treat maybe moderate to severe pain. Most of these medications are under international control. Substances like heroin, which is called diacetylmorphin, fentanyl, codeine, these are all important medicines. In the right hands, they are good medicines. In the wrong hands, they can be bad drugs. And for those who've seen family, even recovering from surgery, benefiting from these medicines, it is a travesty to deny people access to this when they really need it. But we also have an issue to deal with. It's the diversion of these substances from licit to illicit markets. What does that result in? We've spoken about how important it is to grant people access to these medicines when they need them. When you've got diversion going on, you deny these people access to something they need for legitimate purposes. And as a result of diversions, we sometimes end up with these substances going to the black market and being so exorbitant in prices that those who need it cannot afford it. And then there is the other part of the equation where non-medical use leads to consequences like drug use disorders, which we would rather avoid. Without doubt, access to medicines for medical and scientific purposes is a very complex subject, a very complex issue, and it requires a lot of interagency collaboration, which we're going to illustrate today with the beautiful work we've done with the World Health Organization and the International Narcotics Control Board, and also the partnerships with civil society organizations to be able to make a difference. Ultimately, we want to improve availability of and access to these controlled substances. But we also want to prevent their diversion to the illicit market. And we all work under the premise of the conventions, and the conventions ultimately want to ensure that we protect the health and welfare of humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, the UNODC Synthetic Drug Strategy brings together such expertise from multiple agencies and stakeholders to be able to provide a comprehensive framework for responding to such complex issues like access to medicines. On this note, I would like to thank our experts from UNODC, from the Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation Section. I also want to thank our colleagues from the World Health Organization and from the INCB for putting together such an amazing package on access to medicines. I hope you enjoyed this session. Now, please allow me to hand over to Stephanie, who will be taking you through this session. Enjoy and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice, for these opening remarks and for setting the stage for this very important topic. We are very pleased to welcome you to this session within the Ask the Expert live consultation series on access and diversion prevention, featured by our partners, the UNODC Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation Section, the World Health Organization, and the International Narcotics Control Board. For this consultation session, we muted the microphones and disabled the cameras of the participants, so please use the chat function to communicate with us. And questions to the experts can be posted in the chat at any time and will be answered by the experts in an open question and answer session. Thank you very much. So the Ask the Expert live series provides a rare opportunity for Toolkit users from all around the world to consult directly with substantive experts from across the UN system, to ask technical questions and get real-time answers from the experts personally. And through this activity, we are empowering our users to maximize utility of the practical resources and tools which are referenced within the toolkit on synthetic drugs. I would like to take the opportunity to thank all participants to join us, as well as our guest experts for this session, Ms Giovanna Campello from UNODC, Ms Dilkushi Poovendran from WHO, and Mr Stefano Berterame from the Secretariat of the INCB. I would like to start with a brief introduction of the synthetic drug strategy and the toolkit on synthetic drugs, followed by a brief walk through the specialized module within the toolkit on access and diversion prevention, before I will turn it over to our guest experts for an open question and answer session. Synthetic drugs and its precursors are posing a global challenge to public health systems, law enforcement operations, criminal justice systems, as well as legislative responses to control these substances. This is a very complex and ever-changing growing problem as it manifests all around the world, and it is challenging global, regional, and national responses and strategies. So the more important it is to address such a complex and ever-evolving issue in an integrated manner. And through 2 resolutions, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs called on UNODC, WHO, and INCB to take action in enhancing and strengthening international and regional cooperation and domestic efforts to address the international threats posed by the non-medical use of synthetic opioids, as well as advancing effective and innovative approaches to address those multifaceted challenges. As a response, in 2018, the UNODC Opioid Strategy was developed and provides a framework for action to enable comprehensive and integrated responses. The strategy coordinates integrated efforts to address the challenges posed by the non-medical use of synthetic drugs, and in particular synthetic opioids, and brings together a wide range of expertise from UNODC, but also from across the UN system through collaboration with key interagency partners, such as the International Narcotic Control Board, the WHO, World Health Organization, the Universal Postal Union, and the World Customs Organization, to name a few, to leverage a unique set of complementary activities and programs and their specialized expertise to support countries to build capacity to predict, prevent, and protect against the challenges posed by synthetic drugs, including synthetic opioids. The emergence of new psychoactive substances and the dynamic nature of synthetic drug markets have by necessity required equally adaptable solutions and continuous refinements of strategies. So learning from the past and experiences gained in responding to previous synthetic drug crises, such as the most recent opioid crisis, which is still ongoing and mainly affecting North America with fentanyl and parts of Africa with tramadol. The UNODC synthetic drug strategy was launched to expand the scope to all kinds of synthetic drugs, as well as synthetic opioids. The synthetic drug strategy is built on 4 synergetic and complementary spheres of action, which constitute a comprehensive framework to guide international, regional, and national action to support countries to effectively address the growing synthetic drug problem. And recognizing the need of more practical ways on how to respond to such a complex issue as the growing synthetic drugs problem, and to further support countries with the implementation of their responses, the UN Toolkit on Synthetic Drugs has been developed in collaboration with WHO and INCB and was set up in 2019. As you already know, the UN Toolkit on Synthetic Drugs is an open source online platform which houses a wide range, currently more than 300 cross-cutting tools and resources to help countries with the practical implementation of the guidance provided in the strategy. I would now like to show you a short video to introduce you to the UN Toolkit on synthetic drugs. Excuse me, very quick. There is no sound. I will turn on the sound. My apologies. So also before the UN Toolkit on synthetic drugs was established, there were, of course, already many different services and resources all related to synthetic drugs, but they were very scattered across multiple UN agencies, which made it sometimes difficult for users to easily access information about various aspects related to synthetic drugs. So imagine you would like to get a more comprehensive overview of the synthetic drug problem, including various areas of responses coming from multiple disciplines. You would need to consult numerous organizations and programs to find the information and would already need to know what it is that you are looking for and where to find it. And from a user's perspective, all these kind of topics are interrelated and connected. So the toolkit gathers all those different cross-cutting tools from across the UN system and covering multiple areas of expertise all in one place, in one single platform, and serves, so to say, as a one-stop shop, offering practical tools to help member states to identify solutions. So it is not only a repository of resources related to synthetic drugs, it also enables this broader understanding of the significance and importance of each topic in relation to synthetic drugs, and also how these different disciplines are related to each other and interlink with each other for comprehensive and more effective responses. I would now like to do a brief demo of the Toolkit website and also showcasing the specialized module on access and diversion prevention before I will turn it over to our guest experts. The toolkit was developed with the generous support of US State INL and Canada, and its availability in other languages was supported by the Russian Federation for the Russian version of the toolkit. OESC cards supported with the Spanish version of the toolkit. We also just recently launched a French version of the toolkit that was also supported by Canada, and have the toolkit also available in Chinese, which was supported by the Forensic Science Institute in Beijing. By the end of 2022, we are also looking to have the toolkit available in Arabic, so that we have it available in all 6 official UN languages. The global synthetic drugs problem is multifaceted and it is constantly evolving, and so is the toolkit itself. So we will be adding new areas of responses on a continuous basis, and we will start with a new module within the health responses series on prevention, thanks to the collaboration with UNODC Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation Section. And we will be adding also a module on advanced investigative techniques and air cargo security by the end of the year. The About page of the toolkit gives a brief context and background information on the development of the toolkit, as well as brief descriptions of the thematic areas that are currently covered within the toolkit that we refer to as modules. One of the features is the Ask an Expert feature on the website, which allows users to send their specific questions to a specialist, to a subject matter expert. So users can fill in this form aligned with the modules within the topic and put in the question, and the synthetic drug strategy will direct the question to the subject matter experts. And building on this feature, we are holding the expert consultation series and bringing this feature to life, so to say, where participants have the opportunity to put their questions directly to the subject matter experts and bring the toolkit users closer to the interagency expertise that is housed within the toolkit. In case you have missed one of the previous sessions, you're welcome to watch them within the highlight section of the toolkit, where we have published the recordings. The toolkit itself is divided into different modules, into different thematic areas. And each thematic areas is related to synthetic drugs. We have currently 9 modules covered: forensic, postal security, early warning system, precursors, cybercrime, treatment and care, legal, and COVID-19 responses. And today we will focus on access and diversion prevention, which was developed in collaboration with UNODC, WHO, and INCB. Should you already have a question during the brief demo of the access and diversion prevention module, I would kindly like to ask you to post a question directly in the chat, and one of our experts is happy to answer to them right after the demo. The module on access and diversion prevention will answer to questions such as why access to controlled medicines is important and what are the barriers to adequate use. It includes also a section on pain management and how to put in place balanced policies on the prescription of opioids for effective pain management. Within this section, you will find WHO guidelines for cancer pain, integrating palliative care and symptom relief into responses of humanitarian emergencies and crises, with also a special focus on children. The section on the pharmaceutical value chain includes information and tools that are available to prevent shortages in the context of the pharmaceutical value chain, touching on legislation, regulation, governance, and monitoring. You will find a section on availability of internationally controlled drugs for medical use. That includes INCB resources, as well as a section on selection, pricing, and reimbursement. The section on measuring and monitoring access includes information on how to collect and analyze data on availability and affordability, and which can be found here, and how to report on the movement of internationally controlled substances. Another very important section within the module on access and diversion prevention is on international control of medicines, which contains resources on how to ensure balance in national policies on controlled substances, including technical guidance from UNODC on increasing access and availability of controlled medicines, as well as the INCB report Progress in Ensuring Adequate Access to Internationally Controlled Substances for Medical and Scientific Purposes. Finally, the section on rational prescribing and use includes recommended interventions on how to promote rational use. So, putting together this very useful and comprehensive module was a joint effort of UNODC, WHO, and INCB. And we are very delighted to have 3 UN experts here with us today to answer directly to all the questions you might have on this specific, very important topic. I will now turn it over to our guest experts. Ms Giovanna Campello from UNODC, who has more than 25 years of experience with UNODC in working with member states and stakeholders at all levels to improve drug prevention response by applying and contributing to scientific evidence. Since 2016, she has been leading the Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation Section, thus promoting not only drug prevention, treatment, care and rehabilitation that are evidence-based, gender and human rights sensitive practice on, but also access to controlled medicines while preventing diversion and non-medical use. Welcome, Giovanna, to this session. Ms Dilkushi Poovendran, a technical officer with the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence Secretariat with the WHO Division on Access to Medicines and Health Products. Dilkushi joined WHO in 2017 and has since been instrumental in strengthening the ECDD science-based prioritization and review process of psychoactive substances and coordinated the review of dozens of new psychoactive substances, including new potent opioids, as well as plants such as cannabis and kratom. Welcome, Dilkushi, and thank you very much for joining us today in this session. And Mr. Stefano Berterame was appointed as Chief of the Narcotics Control and Estimate Section of the INCB Secretariat in 2013. Prior to his appointment in the INCB Secretariat, Mr. Berterame served as a Chief of the Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation Section, and earlier as Drug Abuse Epidemiologist and Focal Point on Youth in the same section. Before that, Mr. Berterame was Assistant Program Officer with UNICEF, Project Officer in Ethiopia with the NGO TZIP, and Press and Public Relations Officer in the private sector. Mr. Berterame holds a PhD in Sociology from the University of Manchester and graduate degree in Sociology of the University of Rome. Stefano, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. I would now like to open the floor to questions, and we are kindly inviting you to post your question along with your email address in the chat, in case there won't be enough time to answer to all questions. So to make sure that your question can be also answered by an expert after the session. As for the experts, I would like to ask you to use the raise hand function to indicate who would like to answer to this question. Thank you very much, and I will now turn it over to the experts. So, first question from the Ask the Expert page. Is it true that most of the world's pain medicines are available in North America and there are shortages everywhere else? Why is there such an imbalance? Stefano, please.
Mike, thank you very much for this question. Well, the situation is such that there's been a certain level of control on the controlled substances, but there is a lot of responsibility on the countries to make sure that there is what is called also by WHO as rational prescribing. And what we have seen is that over time, in some areas of the world, in particular North America, there's been under the pressure of the pharmaceutical company that also saw the possibility of profit in this, that there was an overprescription of strong synthetic opioids, in particular oxycodone and fentanyl, that were prescribed for pain that was not exactly the pain for which the medicine were developed. So for chronic pain like back pain, etc., while this medicine were developed more specifically for serious health suffering like cancer, etc. So, but I think that Dilkushi from WHO would be able to be more precise than me, since I'm not a medical doctor. But in reality, what happened is that there was extensive prescribing, extensive use created a situation of dependency that then translated into an epidemic. And then when the government introduced restrictions, people turned to illicit market to sustain their dependence. On the other hand, you have a situation where many countries that instead would need the opioids analgesic for the treatment of the conditions like cancer, post-operational treatment, etc., in reality, they are facing a situation where they do not have access to this opioid. In particular, WHO in its essential medicine list recommends morphine as the, if you like, the gold standard in terms of treatment of pain. And the information that we have from a number of countries that is very difficult for them to procure even morphine. One of the reasons is that morphine is not profitable, and so the pharmaceutical company are not always willing to invest in this. Maybe more than my words, I would like to share a map that is also, I think, available on the toolkit. This is a map that was prepared by the Lancet Commission on pain relief and palliative care, that was based on the data from INCB in terms of consumption, and also on the data that they themselves developed together with the data from the Global Burden of Disease and WHO on what was the need in each country. So if you see that North America is inflated because they consumed several times more than what they needed, while you see that, for example, Africa, you could hardly see Africa in the map, because in Africa there is a coverage of the pain with the medicine and the opioids analgesic that are available. That is, for example, in Uganda, is 0.2% of the need is covered. So that is the situation that there is currently in the world, and what I think the UN and other organizations are trying to address. I leave it to the others to complete. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for this very comprehensive and informative answer. Dilkushi, please.
Yes, WHO's point of view is that there is a really serious lack of access of controlled medicines, and especially pain medicines in most countries in the world. And as Stefano described, there was a problem in North America relating to overprescribing of pain medicines, which led to unintended consequences and people turning to much more dangerous, harmful synthetic drugs. And the fear of overuse in North America led a lot of other countries to be afraid of actually prescribing pain medicines when they're actually very important medicines, especially medicines mentioned such as morphine, which are considered to be essential by WHO. And they can be safely prescribed when prescribed appropriately. So this is a global problem, both in terms of the overuse in some countries and the underuse of pain medicines in other countries. But I also wanted to mention that beyond pain medicines, there is a general lack of other types of controlled medicines. So where there's a lack of access to morphine, there are other medicines like barbiturates, which are needed for treating neurological disorders. There are medicines used for the treatment for opioid agonist therapy for treating heroin dependence issues. There are many, many conditions that require medicines, not just for pain management and palliative care. And there is a lack of access to those medicines on a global basis. Maybe I don't know if anyone else has anything else they would like to add.
Thank you very much, Dilkushi. Giovanna, please.
In reality, I just want to add a small point of hope, right? Like Dilkushi and Stefano were describing, we are in many countries in the world faced with two almost polar opposites, you know, sometimes too much availability and sometimes too little. But there are a few countries where the situation is more balanced, and I think we should not lose of the sight that this balance is possible. It is possible, like Dilkushi was mentioning, to create a system that allows the patients that need access to this medicine to use them safely and effectively. And that's what we should not lose sight. We should not be paralyzed by fear, but really build on the excellent tools. We have some, but of course WHO is the lead agency in creating that clinical guidance, and INCB is the lead agency in supporting the regulatory organizations. And we have good experiences in bringing everybody together. So let's not lose sight that it is possible to improve the situation. It is possible to achieve that balance, and that we can work together towards it. And if I can add a small thing about building on what Stefano and also Dilkushi was mentioning about treatment. Remember what Stefano just mentioned, when the situation of overprescribing started to get problematic, of course, there were restrictions imposed, which is, of course, natural and understandable, but that meant unintended consequences. One thing that did not happen was to strengthen treatment for people with drug use disorders. So we always, again, we should not lose sight that everything goes together, and you should not increase controls without thinking about the people that will need treatment for drug use disorders, including through controlled medicines, right? The for the maintenance, for medication assisted therapy, and the people that will need controlled medicines in other settings. But it is possible. We just need to do it.
Thank you very much, Giovanna, and to all three of you for this very, very comprehensive answer to this first question. The next question would be also from the Ask the Expert form. How can governments ensure opioids that are legally prescribed for medical purposes are not diverted? Giovanna, please.
That was an old end. Yeah.
A legacy hand.
A legacy end, indeed. Maybe let Stefano take the lead, and I can add some considerations, given that is one of the core functions of our Secretariat.
Stefano, please.
Thank you. So, well, the system of control of the substances that was established by the Convention in 61 and 71, in particular 61 for opioids analgesic, is something that was developed many years ago. Over the years, it has proven, as at least at the international level, in terms of trade, production, manufacturing, that is working. According to the data that we have internationally, there is very few cases of diversion. Therefore, the system as it is may need some improvement and update in terms of the technologies that is using, because in 1961 there were still letters, telegrams, etc. Now we have web-based tools that can facilitate this process a lot. But the problem of the diversion happens mostly at national level, and this is where the countries have their responsibilities, and then the countries need to develop according to their own situation the system that they think is more efficient in limiting diversion, but at the same time not limiting diversion in a way that then those who need the medicine do not have access to it. And this is the balance that they need to, make sure it exists. I think, one of the tools that we have seen at least being used more often by some countries is the use of electronic system of prescribing in order to clearly identify the prescription with the user, so that the pharmacist would dispense the medicine only to the user, and the fact that prescription cannot be used for other purposes or by other people. That is one of the examples that has been given. But there are different tools. Now I cannot go into the details of those that we know about, but I think it's something that needs to be done at national level, even with the control, for example, that can be applied to the manufacturers, which is something that I think the authorities are doing. At the same time, what happens is that if there is the need for a substance to be abused, then you will if you put restrictions on the illicit manufacturing and trade, then you see the development also of illicit trade. Therefore, it's a problem that is quite complex to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. So, Giovanna, would you like to add to this question?
I think Dilkushi was first.
My apologies. Dilkushi, please.
Sure. Yeah, one other key area that governments can address to prevent diversion is ensuring appropriate use of the medicines to begin with, to prevent them from being sold on and used in unintended ways. So on the toolkit, there is a segment that describes some options available to countries to ensure that medicines aren't being diverted. And those include things like establishing national bodies to coordinate medicines policies, using clinical guidelines, developing them at national level, and also using clinical guidelines that have been established at global level, including by some of the WHO guidelines that are currently available on the toolkit. Developing and using national essential medicines lists, so ensuring that when medicines are being prescribed, that there is a significant evidence base to show that these are the most efficacious medicines. They can be safely developed and prescribed, that they're cost effective, so that at national medicines lists and the medicines that are being prescribed to people are the best medicines for the conditions that are being treated. And I think those are some of the really key areas also of ensuring that medicines aren't being diverted, is by ensuring that they're being prescribed appropriately and in a rational way in the first instance. Maybe I'll hand over to Giovanna if she wanted to add anything to that.
Very little, and what I had in mind is something bridging something that Stefano said and Dilkushi already highlighted. So for me, sometimes this focus on diversion is very understandable, but it's a bit distracting. If you remember that map that Stefano showed us, it was showing, like, for example, Nigeria, and there was like 0.2% of the need is covered in Nigeria according to the map. And to me, in this context, the problem is not even diversion that much. There is just not enough to divert. Yeah, there is just not enough to divert from the system, and that's where we need to, and that's where people get into trouble, like Stefano was mentioning, not because of diversion or anything, but because if they do need medication, then they need to resort to the unregulated market. And that's where they get in trouble because there is no quality control. They don't know what they are using, honestly, and they're not using with the support of a health workers that can guide them through prescription into using the medicine in a safe way. And so that's why the focus on access, we need to think that the focus on access will help fight diversion and the use of the unregulated market, because the people who do need the medicines will not need to resort to these gray illegal markets, but will be able to use them safely and effectively in the context of the health system. And of course, the response of how to build that system is in our collective tools, starting from those that we have all produced to support different kind of stakeholders, the policymakers, the health workers, even the general public and the regulatory body to do their best to contribute to building this system harmoniously.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I see that there is a hand up from Catherine Peters. So I would kindly, we disabled we muted the microphones. So I would kindly like to ask to use the chat function to put your question or to drop your question in the chat. Thank you very much. I would like to proceed with the next question from Ms. Sayek. When a substance is scheduled, won't that limit legitimate access to it? Giovanna, please. No, legacy hand. Stefano, please.
Yes. So now, I think there was a discussion at one point in the context of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs when there was a consideration about scheduling ketamine, which was not recommended by WHO, was I think a suggestion coming from a member states, China. And then at that point, I think there was an analysis on how the scheduling may have affected the availability of certain substances. In particular, was for psychotropics. But the analysis that we did was basically that there was no impact in terms of scheduling on the availability. However, the problem still remains that once the substance is scheduled under control, the competent authorities needs to make sure that they are in a position to ensure the safe and rational prescribing and the availability for for those who need it. And this means that, for example, certain obstacles and bureaucratic requirements that may not be necessary and are not prescribed by the conventions need to be avoided if in the end they unduly restrict their access to the medication. So scheduling per se may not be, international scheduling per se may not be a factor limiting access. What is maybe the more relevant limiting factor is the implementation of this international requirement at national level with more bureaucratic hurdles, if you like.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for answering to that question. So then next question. How is the UNODC, INCP, WHO managing the issues of opioids that are being shipped from countries where they are not controlled to countries where there is control?
I think we
Stefano,
need to call
please.
our colleagues on border control. Sorry, Stefano, go ahead.
No, this is, I mean, I don't know if I understood correctly the question, but from what we understand, illicitly produced opioids, such as, for example, in Afghanistan, heroin that is produced in Afghanistan, and when it's shipped to other countries, still remain illicit. So there is no way to make it illicit trade, something that is being produced illicitly. So, you know, from the point of view of the conventions, heroin or morphine is controlled also in Afghanistan. It's not that it's not controlled. It's just that Afghanistan is unable to implement the requirements of the convention, for example, in relation to opioids. And basically, if a substance is controlled internationally, we have more than 184 countries that have, ratified the convention. The condition is that they need to translate those control lists into their national legislation. So I think what the colleague from Nigeria may be referring to was the fact that, for example, heroin that is illicitly produced in Afghanistan is then shipped to another country, but that is illicit trade. It's not what we're talking about in this context, if I may say so.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Adebowale, Abdullah Rahman from Nigeria, and Stefano for these very interesting questions. I would like to proceed with the next question from Emilia. How the countries in which are permitted medicines obtained as extracts of cannabis with THC are dealing with the classification as psychotropic or narcotic. Since the classification of extracts of cannabis in List 1 of 1961 Convention and the THC listed as a psychotropic 1971 Convention, this caused me a little confusion. Stefano, please.
Thank you. Maybe I don't know if Dilkushi was to take this, but I can say to Emilia that she's not alone in being confused. So this is an area of the convention where there is some unclarity. I think that WHO tried in 2019 to implement, to change the scheduling in order to clarify the scheduling of the various substances between cannabinoids and also extracts of cannabinoids, etc., etc. Unfortunately, the recommendation of WHO were not endorsed by the Commission. Only one recommendation was endorsed, but it didn't really have an impact on the overall scheduling. So what we have done, together also with the participation of other organizations such as WHO, but the INCB is the body that is mandated to request the countries the way in which they submit the information to the board. So we have been discussing for a number of years now, at least 2 years, a way of reporting that is harmonized, and then there is this thing is being considered by the board and hopefully will be translated into something for member state. But generally, what the proposal that we have also discussed with member states would be that cannabis flowering tops, so the dried cannabis flower would be reported under the 61 Convention in kilograms, and then the moment that the manufacturing starts, then that would be accounted for as controlled cannabinoids, and therefore the countries will need to report to INCB and to the international community through INCB the cannabinoids that are controlled. And the cannabinoids that are controlled in the 71 Convention is THC in Schedule 2, THC and its isomers in Schedule 1, and Delta-9 THC in Schedule 2. Now, in the convention, there is also at the moment the extract and tinctures, and that the proposal from WHO was to delete this because it's very difficult to identify precisely what is an extract or tincture or what is not an extract and tinctures. And also, in reality, the INCB does not receive too many reporting of this kind. So the proposal would be to basically encourage countries to report either, as I said, dried flower in the 61, and then the control cannabinoids under the 71. So we are working in that direction, and we will see if the board endorse this recommendation that came out of a consultation that we had with the countries through various intergovernmental meetings. So I don't know if Dilkushi would like to add something to this.
Yeah, just to add that. Oh,
sorry, Dilkushi. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that WHO did also recognize the confusion amongst countries about how to classify the various components of cannabis, especially those that have emerging medical and scientific use, as per the current control status of the different components. And so undertook a review in 2019 and made a series of recommendations to change the control measures to sort of streamline the way that the different components are scheduled and controlled and reported to INCB. The one recommendation that was endorsed was about the cannabis plant itself, and the remaining recommendations, including the deletion of extracts and tinctures, was not accepted. So it continues to be reported to INCB in the way that Stefano was describing. But we also do recognize that there is kind of a confusion around how the different components are controlled under the conventions. And that's why the review was undertaken a few years ago.
Thank you very much, Dilkushi and Stefano. And Emily, I hope the answers from Dilkushi and Stefano could shine some light on your confusion. I would like to proceed with the next question. What are the main obstacles to accessing controlled medicines around the world? Dilkushi.
I can just start from the kind of the WHO point of view in terms of the medicine supply chain. That just to note that there are challenges in accessing medicines on a global level, not just for controlled medicines, but also for other types of medicines, including vaccines, for example. And those barriers to accessing medicines can be found at any level, any step in the medicine supply chain, right from the very beginning, from the R&D and innovation stage, that's including the research of substances for scientific use, and all the way down to prescribing, dispensing, use at the patient level, manufacturing of medicines, the pricing and reimbursement of medicines. So all of these different aspects of the pharmaceutical supply chain presents potential barriers to accessing medicines. And so, yeah, I think in terms of finding solutions to those barriers, they can be found at any step and can cover legislative aspects as well as regulation, governance, and monitoring. So this is where I would encourage participants in today's meeting to look at the pharmaceutical value chain, which is in the toolkit, to really understand the way that medicines are produced from start to finish, and the different stages in which there can be problems in kind of creating access to those.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dilkushi. I just also want to quickly comment that this part of your answer that you were referring to can be also found in the toolkit in the section on the pharmaceutical value chain. I think next it was Stefano and then Giovanna. So please, Stefano.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see the graph I'm sharing. It's from a publication that the board did in 2018. And you can see that over from 95 to 2018, there are various factors that are considered by the competent authorities, the regulatory authorities in the countries, as having an impact on the availability. And in 2018, the year of the last survey, the lack of training was considered to be, the most relevant of the impediments, followed by fear of addiction. And then there are other impediments that are reported there, like, for example, problem in sourcing, fear of diversion, and then fear of prosecution and sanctions, and limited financial resources, etc., etc. So if you like, in these stories, the positive thing that we see is that, for example, the fear of addiction has gone down over the years, as well as the pink one that is on top, and also the dark pink one or purple one that is at the bottom is the onerous regulation. So it seems to be that gradually the countries are realizing that the problem is the training of the health staff that needs to be trained in the rational prescribing and administering of this medication, for example, as well as another problem that is relevant is the the availability in terms of sourcing and procuring this material. As I was saying, for example, in relation to morphine, there are problems that needs to be dealt with.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Giovanna, please.
Thank you so much, and I'm taking the cue from what Stefano was mentioning and bringing our experience in actually trying to work at national level in some countries to increase access to controlled medicines, and we've been able to be active in few countries, but in all continents. So even if it's certainly not a representative sample, in my mind, it brings a good diversity of kind of countries. And apart from what Stefano and Dilkushi were already mentioning, to me, one of the barriers to which I have alluded together is the fact that the relevant stakeholders don't often have the opportunity, or there is not a practice of sitting together and really trying to look at the issue and trying to solve it together. And you need to do that because there is a very point of view from the Ministry of Health, there is the regulatory body, but there is also drug control. There are, of course, the contribution that can be done by civil society and academia. And if people don't sit together, then the most powerful stakeholder, which could very well be a stakeholder that is very fearful, for example, of diversion, will impose unnecessary strictures in the supply chain, and access will be strangled. While if there is that dialogue, and this is something that I can bring, I don't want to name the countries, even if they were, it was a happy ending, so to speak, but it was still a lot of time of sitting together and really allaying the fears of increase in addiction, allaying the fears of increasing diversion, looking together at that supply chain like Dilkushi was mentioning, and finding where things could be changed to address distortions. And it can be painful and long, but it is possible. So I think that creating those opportunities more at the national level also allows a better use of the resources that have been also created by all of us, all of the clinical guidance that WHO has developed, electronic-based learning of INCB for the regulatory stakeholders, and so on. But without that dialogue, we don't get very far. And after that dialogue, I mean, for me, the most important investment is still in the health workers and the health systems that the health workers need to feel confident that they can prescribe in a safe way. And in the end, we have helped the member states to address a bit their supply. We have helped with data collection. We had helped with regulations. But what we have most helped them with is to support health workers. And so that is something that really, really needs a lot of attention going forward.
Thank you very much to all three of you. We are running out of time, I know, but there is one last question that is also a very important one. So I would like to take this last question on estimate needs. So the question would be, as an official working in my country's regulatory body, how can I know if we are requiring the right amount or controlled substances, for if we are overestimating? How can we more accurately estimate needs? Stefano, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this answer would have to come also from Dilkushi, because it's a joint work that the board did with the WHO on estimating correctly the need for controlled substances. I think in the toolkit, as well as in the website of WHO NCB, this toolkit is available, and it guides you. It's a guide to how to estimate and suggests 3 methods that are the one commonly used: past year consumption and trend calculated with an increase over the years. This is what majority of the countries, according to our data, are using, but it's not the best one. Probably the best one would be a mix of the 3 methods, but then there is the second method, which is the service-based estimates. Basically, a country needs to ask the health services for the amount that they understand they would be needing in that year, so that they can bring together all the needs and then put them together as an estimate for the whole country. But of course, this assumes or implies the fact that the health services are able to cover the needs of the whole country, which is not always the case in many countries. So there needs to be some adjustment, needs to be made also in this case, depending on the development of the health infrastructure. The third method is the morbidity-based method. Again, this is based on the amount of people that would be, estimated to be suffering from a certain health condition and would be in need of treatment for that condition with a medication that has a certain daily dosage for a number of days. So this requires maybe a quite developed epidemiological system, which is not common even in high-income countries. So I would think that if there is information from these 3 sources and they are able to be put together, probably each country should be able to have a better proxy of what they would need. But I think Dilkushi may have more to say about this, because WHO has been leading on this in this area.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Dilkushi.
Yeah, just to say that I agree with everything that Stefano said, and there is a document available in the toolkit in terms of how to better report and estimate the needs of medicines, but also that a lot of the shortages that exist on not just controlled medicines again, but medicines in general, happen at facility or local level. And so it's kind of important to establish kind of systematic ways of reporting at national level, not just at country level when there are shortages of medicines, but also to kind of collect data from local hospitals and healthcare facilities to understand when there are shortages of important medicines like morphine.
Thank you very much, Dilkushi. And let me also just quickly bring you back and let me show you the guidance that can be found within the toolkit on measuring and monitoring access and estimating world requirements. So we are coming to the end, unfortunately. And let me thank everyone, because this shows how interagency collaboration and bringing together specialized expertise from various areas is key to comprehensively addressing such a complex issue as balancing access and availability of internationally controlled substances and preventing their diversion. And this joint effort enables countries to identify these comprehensive and multifaceted approaches for effective responses. We are pulling together interagency collaboration through the UNODC synthetic drug strategy to promote the importance of addressing access, providing all the necessary tools and taking action on the CND call for action. So we would like to cordially thank everyone who took the time today to join us in this session on access and diversion prevention. And I would like to especially thank Giovanna, Dilkushi, and Stefano for being here with us today and provide their specific expertise and insight to this very important topic. I will leave the chat open in case there are more questions, so you can drop your questions anytime in the chat and leave your email address, and the experts will be happy to answer to your questions also afterwards. Thank you very much to all the participants and the experts for this very lively and fruitful question and answer session. Thank you very much.